right, let's jump into today's deep dive. Um, you ready for this one?
Yeah.
North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
This one, when I first saw it, I was like,
Yeah.
what is going on? This sounds like something out of like an alternate history novel.
Yeah.
But we got articles from sources like the Indian Express. We got Al Jazeera. We even got APA News over in Azerbaijan,
Wow.
all saying that this is actually happening. So how did North Korea get involved in this conflict, and what does it mean for the bigger picture?
Well, I think when you look at it at first glance, it's a real head scratcher,
Yeah.
North Korea and Ukraine. But when we step back and look at the history between Russia and North Korea,
Okay.
it starts to make a little more sense.
Okay.
The relationship goes way back, all the way to the creation of North and South Korea after World War II.
Ah, yes, the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
I remember learning about this in school.
Yeah.
Soviets backing the North, U.S. backing the South Korea became this proxy battleground for these global superpowers.
Exactly. And, to understand North Korea's allegiance to Russia, you have to understand the figure who really shaped the nation.
Okay.
Kim Il-sung, North Korea's founder and, as they call him, eternal president.
Okay, so Kim Il-sung,
Yeah.
what's his story? He seems like a key player here.
He's absolutely central to the story. He had this fascinating rise to power, fighting as a guerrilla against Japanese rule in Korea, spending time in both China and the Soviet Union during World War II.
Oh, wow.
It's even rumored that Lavrentiy Beria,
Oh, my goodness.
the head of Stalin's secret police, the NKVD, actually suggested Kim Il-sung as a potential leader for North Korea.
Wow. It's like this history is full of all these like hidden connections like we never knew.
Yeah.
So Kim Il-sung takes charge in 1948, and then just a few years later, the Korean War explodes.
Right. And that conflict cemented North Korea's relationship with Russia, or the Soviet Union as it was then. The Soviets were crucial in supporting North Korea militarily, helping them resist the U.S.-backed South. This shared experience of fighting side by side forged a bond that surprisingly has lasted even after the Soviet Union itself collapsed.
It is surprising. You'd think that the end of the Cold War would have
Yeah.
reshuffled the deck, but Russia continued to be North Korea's main supporter.
Yeah, you're right. It is surprising considering the global shifts that were happening at the time. But the relationship endured.
Huh.
The Indian Express article that we have actually details how extensive this support has been.
Okay.
Russia supplied vital resources like petroleum and food.
Yeah.
And remember the devastating famines that North Korea suffered in the 1990s?
Yeah.
Russia sent billions of rubles in aid.
That's a massive lifeline. Like, imagine a whole country on the brink of starvation.
Yeah.
That kind of aid would be a game changer.
Absolutely. And even when North Korea began testing nuclear weapons back in 2006,
Right.
triggering international condemnation and UN sanctions,
Yeah.
Russia still maintained those defense ties.
Wow.
This wasn't just a fair-weather friendship. This was a deep strategic partnership.
So fast forward to today and these reports of North Korea sending troops to Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's like this historical connection is suddenly front page news again.
Yeah, and it has certainly been met with a strong reaction from the West.
Oh, I bet.
Al Jazeera highlights the outrage from many world leaders who see this as a dangerous escalation of the conflict.
Yeah, which is understandable, right?
Yeah.
Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz even called it a grave escalation when he spoke with Putin.
Yeah, the potential for escalation is a serious concern, but it's interesting to see how reactions differ across the globe.
Okay.
For example, French President Macron seems to support the U.S.'s decision to allow Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia.
Okay, that's a bold move.
Yeah.
And I bet it's making a lot of people nervous.
Definitely. And you have leaders like Robert Fico in Slovakia and Peter Zijarto in Hungary
Yeah.
who are urging caution, worried that this could provoke Russia even further.
Right.
It highlights the complexities of this situation.
Yeah.
And how even allies have very different perspectives on how to proceed.
It's like a global chess game
Yeah.
with incredibly high stakes.
Right.
And all of this seems to stem from that strategic partnership treaty that Putin and Kim Jong-un signed back in June,
Yeah.
where they basically agreed to have each other's backs in case of an attack.
Right. And now with North Korean troops reportedly in Ukraine, it seems Kim Jong-un is making good on that promise. It adds a whole new layer of intrigue and uncertainty to an already volatile situation.
Yeah.
So we've traced this connection from its Cold War roots to present-day Ukraine. Quite a journey.
It really is. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning of the story.
Oh, yeah. So the U.S. giving Ukraine the green light to strike targets within Russia, it's a major development, and it has the potential to really shake things up.
It definitely feels like a turning point.
Yeah.
I mean, until now, the fighting has been largely contained within Ukraine's borders.
Right.
So how might this change the dynamics on the ground?
Well, for Ukraine, it's a potential game changer in terms of strategy.
Okay.
They could disrupt Russian supply lines, target military bases, maybe even strike symbolic targets within Russia itself.
I can see how that would be a huge psychological advantage for Ukraine.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it also risk provoking a major retaliation from Russia?
Absolutely. And that's the danger here.
Yeah.
Putin has already warned of serious consequences if Russia's territory is attacked. We could see Russia intensifying its attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure,
Right.
a renewed push on the front lines, or even, and this is the really worrying possibility,
Oh, gosh.
a move towards using tactical nuclear weapons.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
Is that a realistic scenario, or is it more of a bluff?
It's impossible to say for sure, but Putin has repeatedly invoked Russia's nuclear arsenal as a deterrent. Any strikes on Russian soil could be seen by him as crossing a red line, and that's what makes this situation so precarious.
Okay, so the stakes just got even higher. But how does North Korea fit into all of this? Would they actually get more involved if the conflict escalates?
That's the million-dollar question. On the one hand, it's hard to imagine Kim Jong-un wanting to risk a direct confrontation with a NATO-backed Ukraine.
Right, that would be a huge gamble for him.
Exactly. But on the other hand, he is bound by that strategic partnership treaty with Russia. And let's not forget, North Korea has its own goals in this. They've been steadily building up their nuclear and missile programs.
Yeah.
And this conflict could be an opportunity to test those systems or even profit by selling arms to Russia.
So it's almost like they're playing both sides, trying to benefit from the chaos.
In a way, yes. And then you have China, who's been trying to walk this tightrope of supporting Russia without getting too deeply entangled in the conflict.
It's a tough balancing act for them. I remember reading that the U.S. is already accusing China of supplying Russia with military drones.
That's right. And if China gets more involved, it could trigger further sanctions from the West. It's a real dilemma for them.
So to bring it back to our listener, what we're seeing here is this complex web of alliances,
Yeah.
rising tensions, and the looming threat of nuclear escalation. It's a lot to process. It really is.
Yeah.
And what I'm taking away from all of this is that the world is so interconnected in ways we don't always realize.
Yeah.
Something happening on the other side of the globe can have these ripple effects that we feel right here at home.
That's a great point. The situation in Ukraine isn't just a regional conflict. It's a global crisis with implications for international security, the economy, and even the future of democracy.
So given all these complexities,
Mm-hmm.
what should we be watching for as this situation unfolds? What are the key things to keep an eye on?
I think there are a few critical things to watch.
Okay.
First, Russia's response to any Ukrainian strikes on its territory will be crucial.
Right.
Will they retaliate proportionally, or will they escalate further?
That's going to be the big tell, isn't it?
Yeah,
Their reaction could really determine the next move in this dangerous game of chess.
exactly.
Yeah.
Second, keep a close eye on North Korea.
Okay.
Are they increasing their military support for Russia?
Uh-huh.
Are they taking advantage of the situation to push their own agenda?
And what about China? Will they continue to support Russia, even if it means risking those sanctions from the West?
These are all crucial questions, and unfortunately, there are no easy answers. But by understanding the historical context, the current dynamics, and the potential risks, we can hopefully start to make sense of this complex and ever-changing landscape.
And that brings us to another layer of this whole situation that deserves its own deep dive: the impact on global energy markets. I mean, we're already feeling the effects of this conflict at the gas pump, at the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's hitting everyone's wallets.
You're absolutely right. This war is playing out against the backdrop of an already volatile energy crisis. And that's what we're going to unpack in part 3, how this conflict, these shifting alliances, and the potential for further escalation are sending shockwaves through the global energy landscape. It's a conversation you definitely don't want to miss.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the historical ties between Russia and North Korea to the potential for this conflict to escalate even further. Now let's shift gears and talk about something that affects all of us in a very tangible way: energy. I mean, even before this war started, things were pretty shaky in the global energy market, right?
Absolutely. The war in Ukraine didn't create the energy crisis, but it certainly acted as a catalyst, exposing the vulnerabilities of a system that was already under strain.
Right.
Remember, Europe was heavily reliant on Russian oil and gas. Pipelines were pumping energy westward, like lifelines.
Yeah. And then sanctions hit, and those pipelines started to get squeezed. Some even shut off completely.
Yeah,
I remember seeing those headlines and thinking, wow, this is going to have a ripple effect.
and it did. It exposed just how dependent many countries were on a single supplier. Suddenly, they were scrambling to find alternatives, and of course, prices skyrocketed. We all felt it. Heating our homes, filling up our cars, even the cost of groceries, everything went up.
And this wasn't just a European problem, was it? The impact was felt globally.
Right. You're right, it was a global shock. Those interconnected markets meant that disruptions in one region had consequences worldwide. Even if a country wasn't directly reliant on Russian energy, they still felt the impact through higher prices and competition for resources. It was a wake-up call for a lot of countries.
So we had this already volatile situation, and then the potential for further escalation, especially with North Korea now in the mix, adds another layer of uncertainty to the whole energy equation.
Exactly. If the conflict widens, it could disrupt shipping routes, create instability in key energy-producing regions. It could make investors nervous, hesitant to commit to long-term energy projects.
Right.
And that uncertainty is really the worst thing for energy markets. It makes planning and predicting incredibly difficult.
So essentially, we're looking at a potential domino effect. The conflict escalates, supplies get squeezed even further, prices go through the roof, and the economic pain spreads. It's a worrying scenario.
It is a concerning possibility, and the longer this conflict drags on, the more likely those consequences become. So the question becomes, where do we go from here? What can be done to navigate this energy maze and find a more stable path forward?
Well, what I'm hearing is that maybe the answer lies in not being so dependent on any one supplier, diversifying our energy sources.
You're exactly right. Diversification is key. Reducing dependence on any single supplier, whether it's Russia or anyone else, that's got to be a priority for countries going forward.
Makes perfect sense. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, as the saying goes. But realistically, how do you diversify quickly when building energy infrastructure takes years, sometimes even decades?
It's a challenge for sure. It requires a mix of short-term and long-term solutions. In the short term, it might mean finding alternative suppliers, even if they're more expensive, or maybe even ramping up domestic production, even if it means relying on less environmentally friendly options. It's like triage. You have to stabilize the patient before you can start the long-term healing process.
Okay, so that's the immediate response. But what about the long game? What does a more resilient energy future look like?
The long game has to be investing heavily in renewable energy sources. Solar, wind, geothermal. These technologies are getting more efficient and more affordable all the time. They offer a path towards greater energy independence and, crucially, a more sustainable future for the planet.
So it's about finding that balance, meeting our immediate needs while building a system that's more resilient and sustainable for the future.
Precisely. And this crisis, as difficult as it is, presents an opportunity to really accelerate that transition to renewable energy. Necessity is often the mother of invention, as they say, and this situation could spur innovation and investment in clean energy technologies at a pace we haven't seen before.
So even amidst all the uncertainty and the potential for things to get worse, there's also a glimmer of hope. This crisis might be the point we need to create a cleaner, more sustainable energy future.
I think that's a powerful takeaway. But it's going to take strong leadership, global cooperation, and a willingness to make some tough choices. The stakes are high, not just for individual countries, but for the planet as a whole.
Wow, what a journey this deep dive has been. We started with North Korean troops in Ukraine and ended up talking about the future of global energy. It's incredible how interconnected everything is.
It really is a testament to the complexity of the world we live in. Seemingly isolated events can have far-reaching consequences, and the choices we make today individually, as communities, and as nations, will shape the world of tomorrow.
So if there's one thing you'd want our listener to take away from this entire conversation, what would it be?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we are all in this together. The situation in Ukraine, its impact on the global energy landscape, it underscores the need for us to stay informed, engage in thoughtful dialogue, and advocate for solutions that lead to a more sustainable and equitable future for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And remember to keep asking questions, stay curious, and never stop exploring the complexities of our world.